Okay, so the next step is to install the graphics card. And what you need to do is remove these little panels that are at the back of the case and allow enough room for the graphics card to fit in. Now on the motherboard, you actually have an option to put in the 16 times slot, 8 times slot, and slots that are less than that. Reality is really you want to use 16 times for most video cards, and then you can use the rest for other cards like sound cards and whatnot. But if you have SLI, you would put one in the 8 times slot, and then both of those cards run at 8 times. It gets a bit complicated, but just make sure you put the graphics card in that highest number possible if you just got the single card. And just make sure you secure the lugs in nicely to make sure the graphics card doesn't move anywhere. So we'll be installing a 1TB drive for storage, a 128 gig Vertex SSD, as well as a DVD burner up the top. So inside the box with the case, you should actually have received some drugs. Not drugs. I mean screws that will allow you to screw in the drives into the little chassis like this. In this case, we just pull the slot out that we want to put the hard drive in, line this one up nicely, and in this case, because it's actually a screwless system, we don't have to even put any screws in. We just stretch it out and clip the hard drive in, and we're ready to roll. It's an interesting style of design that Corsair has chosen with this chassis, but obviously with yours you'd want to secure it in with some screws so you make sure it doesn't fly around anywhere. Alright, so the next one we're going to be installing is the solid state. Now there's little holes in here, so you get those screws that they've provided you in the case, and you want to screw each of the screws into the 4 corners of the solid state drive just to hold it in place inside the chassis. Very easy, very simple. Just have some patience when you're doing it to make sure everything lines up nicely. And once we've installed the solid state, we can easily slide that in above our 1TB drive. Okay, so the next step is just to pop out the front cover. We're going to be installing the DVD drive up in the top bay. Now some of you might say, why the heck do you need a DVD drive? Look, every now and then to install an operating system or whatnot, you still need a disk drive, so there's no harm putting one in there. But in this case, because it's a toolless design, all you do is you just push the drive in, click it in, and it's actually installed just like that. And you can, if you want, put some screws in to make sure that the device stays in its spot. Okay, so the next part of this is doing the wiring and installing the power supply. To install the power supply is quite simple. You just place it into the spot where it belongs, in this case down the bottom here. Make sure it's nicely clicked in, and then screw it in from the back to ensure that it is fully placed and secured. Just as some advice when you're screwing it in, always put all of the screws in a little bit and then start tightening them up to make sure it's an even fit. That way you get all the screws lined up nicely. Okay, so moving on, we're going to be doing the cable management of the build, which is the more difficult component. The one trick that I learned is basically plug everything that you know needs to be plugged in on the front, and then push it all towards the back using some of these rubber holes. And then once everything is pushed out to the back, we can work out where everything is going to go. Okay, now that everything's being pushed to the back, we can kind of work out what we're going to do. Now there's a few components here that you need to understand to hook everything up. We've got to power the CPU and motherboard, and then we're going to have to also power up our graphics card, as well as our the solid state drive hard drives, using to connect it to the motherboard as well as powering them. And then we also have to hook up the front of the case to all the ports on the motherboard to ensure that when we turn the actual computer on, it turns on and restarts and everything like this. In this chassis, we actually have a fan controller inbuilt, so that's to do with these cables up top. But you slowly have to work through reading the instruction book with the motherboard as well as the case to work out which cables connect into what. But once you've worked out exactly what goes into where, you can slowly start hooking everything up, which I'll start doing now, and I'll show you when I come back. Okay, and then once everything is cabled up, after 1 hour of mucking around trying to get everything to fit and working out some cables aren't long enough, and a big stress, so you've got to be cool, calm and collected when you start plugging everything in, you end up with something like this. Around the back, you also have a not bad cable management, I think, myself. It looks quite decent. Obviously it's good to get a case that gives you a fair amount of room, because really no one can see the back, so whatever mess you make at the back doesn't really matter. The main thing is trying to group everything together, trying to make it look nice and straight. Some people can do a real good job with cable management, But my advice is, look, first test out the computer that you've built just to make sure nothing's faulty, so you don't have to undo all the hard work you put into making it look beautiful and neat. This has been Mohammed with Product Feedback, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and peace be with you.